It's now my great pleasure to introduce Mark Dreyfus. Yep. I won't give him a long introduction, but the past Attorney General, the Shadow Attorney General, and the future Attorney General.
Thanks very much, Michael. And I too would like to acknowledge the Bunurong people, who are the traditional owners of the land we're on, and welcome all of you. I'll speak up a bit. Welcome all of you to the great electorate of Isaacs, where you are now standing. Some of you are happy to be constituents in Isaacs. All the rest are from other parts of Victoria. And in this 90th year of our ABC, can I thank you all for supporting what is a national treasure. You all know that. You know the vital role that the ABC plays in our community, in our country. You know the vital role that the ABC plays in protecting and nurturing our culture, and you know the vital role that the ABC plays in protecting and nurturing our democracy. The Conservative side of Australian politics loves to attack the ABC. I don't think they really understand that only about 2%, maybe sometimes 1.5% of the total budget of the ABC is actually devoted to news and current affairs. And when they impose these cuts on the ABC, which they do because they hate the way in which the ABC in its news coverage actually puts some scrutiny on the activities of all governments. The ABC doesn't play party favourites. The ABC doesn't say we're only going to examine Liberal governments and oh no, we won't examine Labor governments. I can tell you, having been a Cabinet Minister in a Labor government, the ABC scrutinises Labor governments just as much, but good governments welcome scrutiny. Good governments welcome accountability. This present government is a government that hides from scrutiny. It hides from accountability. It hates transparency. It hates criticism. We've seen it in the way in which they haven't, well, let's be direct, they have broken their promise to establish a National Anti-Corruption Commission. But the attacks on the ABC, which have been constant, are of the same strand of politics. It's the same approach to politics that we see in the breaking of that promise to establish a National Anti-Corruption Commission. It's been a shameful 8.5 years of government. It started in respect of the ABC. It started with Abbott's cuts to the ABC. You've heard from Ivy, you've heard from Michael, and you know, that's why you're here, you know what the effect of those cuts have been. It's been cuts to TV production. It's been cuts to all kinds, just about every part of the ABC's activities have been adversely affected by those cuts which started in 2014. But just relevantly to what's happening in the Solomons this week, think about the way in which the cuts imposed by this government have cut the shortwave transmission of Radio Australia into the Pacific. Because that was the only way for many people in the far outlying islands of the Solomons to receive ABC Australia. And now they don't, because in a very short-sighted way, this government cut the shortwave transmission. And when I come to think, another thing in today's news, in fact, I'll just talk about the Solomons a bit more, just for a moment. It's a shameful dropping of the ball in respect of the Pacific as a whole by this government. The ending of the shortwave transmission is just part of it. They cut aid to the Pacific. They cut aid to the Solomons. And they expect to be able to have some influence. They stood there making jokes on a platform. This is the current Prime Minister and Peter Dutton making jokes about water lapping on our Pacific Island neighbours as sea levels rise. That's the attitude they've got to the Pacific. That's the attitude they've got to the Solomons. And as my excellent colleague Penny Wong has said, this latest agreement between China and the Solomons is the greatest foreign policy disaster in decades. So don't let anyone tell you that this government knows anything about national security. Don't let anyone tell you that this government knows anything about the conduct of foreign relations. They are completely hopeless. Now back, sorry, I just had to get that off my chest. But it's an extraordinary thing to see these persistent, endless attacks on the ABC. I'm reminded by reading that horrible newspaper, The Australian, this morning. I have to, it's my job. None of you have to, but I do. And in it, we see a very large piece with Christian Porter at it again, complaining about the Four Corners program. Just those of you who follow the relationship between our federal government and the ABC would have observed what happened when that program first came to air, or even when it was first mooted. We had the Minister for Communications write to his own agency, the ABC, and threaten it. He wrote to Ida Buttrose, who I'm sure the government did not understand when they appointed her that her dad had been the deputy managing director of the ABC. They thought she was going to be a private media sector person. She has proved to be a very fine chair. We get the communications minister writing to the chair of the ABC to threaten the ABC. He tweeted his letter before it was delivered to Ida Buttrose, and worse, it was at Christian Porter, his colleague, his fellow minister's urging that the letter was sent. Now, no government that respects our ABC should even contemplate acting in that manner, but that tells you all you need to know about this government. It thinks nothing of threatening the ABC. It thinks nothing of cutting its funding. It thinks nothing of making any complaint it can. It thinks nothing of, as Michael has reminded us, of adopting a policy of privatising the ABC. Well, can I make it clear that the Australian Labor Party will never privatise the ABC? And in respect of the list of asks from the friends of the ABC, the Australian Labor Party agrees with every single one of them. Including, and just on the funding, we have pledged to reverse the most recent cut, Mr Morrison's cut of $83.7 million, which he denied making. We've had, in fact, I'm reminded again about the role of the ABC. Fact Check has fact-checked its own minister, Mr Fletcher, who claimed that there had been no cut to funding for the ABC, who claimed that there was rising funding for the ABC. Fact Check disagreed. It said that that is a false claim, because it is a false claim. There is not rising funding for the ABC, there is declining funding for the ABC, and as Fact Check in a very, very detailed analysis makes clear, that is whether you look at it in real dollar terms or in nominal dollar terms. It's a cut any way you look at it. We need to get the ABC back on a sustainable funding basis. We are committed to 5-year funding, a move away from or up from the 3-year funding, because we need to get the funding of the ABC out of the electoral cycle. We need to make sure that it's sustainable and able to be accounted for and protected from the whim of government, which is, of course, what you get when you're on a 3-year funding cycle. So, thank you all for supporting the ABC. Thank you for fighting for the ABC. Sadly, against this mob, it needs fighting for. You will not need to fight for the ABC under an Australian Labor Party government, because an Australian Labor Party government will itself fight for the ABC. So, I've gone on quite long enough. I could keep going because it's a real passion of mine, the way in which the ABC has made our country better for 90 years. It plays our music. It puts on our beautiful TV productions and it's telling Australian stories. It's what we are all able to listen to ad-free every day, all day, if that's what you want to do. And I do spend quite a part of the day listening to the ABC as I'm driving around. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing that we have a country that has an institution like the ABC. The United Kingdom is blessed with their BBC, but think of the desert, the broadcasting, the media desert that there is in the United States. It might seem an odd concept, but it is a media desert compared to us. They've got a tiny public broadcasting service that is funded by philanthropic money, and that's it. They do not have a free, government-funded, independent broadcaster like we do, and long may that continue. So thanks very much for coming.